Hey everyone, Miss Ross here with Mrs. Ross Does Math. Today I'm going to be going over the review for Chapter 8. This is the practice test out of our textbook that we are using for the review. On this, you're doing numbers 1 through 31. I'm hoping that you were able to get some of it started by now, and I'm just going to go ahead and go through and talk about how we can solve each one of these various problems. Okay. So starting out for number 1, in number 1 through 4, we are adding or subtracting our like terms. So we're really going to need to pay attention to our exponents as well as the variables and just the numbers. So here we go. In number 1, we have a squared minus 4a plus 6 in our first parentheses, and we have negative 3a squared plus 13a plus 1 in our second parentheses. For me, it's easier to go ahead and write these vertically, so I'm going to rewrite this problem as that, making sure that I align the correct terms. Leaving my final answer for number 1 as negative 2a plus 9a plus 7. Number 2. So it's easier for you guys. I'm going to go ahead and write these horizontally, but as you're solving these, if you could please write them vertically for me, that would be the easiest when grading this. So for number 2, it says 5x squared minus 2 in our first parentheses, and we have 8x to the third plus 2x minus x plus 9 in the second. Because in the second parentheses I have more terms, I'm actually going to rewrite this and put that as my first grouping. And below it, I'm just going to make sure that I align all of my like terms appropriately. What's separating these initial groups of parentheses is an addition sign, so I'm just going to add these together. Now my 8x to the third and my negative x have no terms to combine with, so the only thing that's going to change is the x squared value and the constant value, which is 7. So the final answer is 8x to the third plus 7x squared minus x plus 7. Number 3. Now in number 3, what's separating our true groupings of parentheses with 15n squared plus 7n minus 1 and 4n squared minus 3n minus 8 is a negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this negative and I'm going to distribute it to everything that's inside. By doing that, I'm actually going to change the sign. So now instead of a positive 4n, I'm going to have a negative 4n, which I'm going to rewrite underneath here. And that's going to be a negative 4n squared. Instead of a negative 3n, I'm going to have a positive 3n. And instead of a negative 8, I'm going to have a positive 8. So what I've done is I've distributed the negative or the minus sign to the second grouping of parentheses, and I've changed it so now my default property is addition once again. So here I'll get 11n squared plus 10n plus 7 as my final answer. Number 4. Now, number 4 has something similar once again, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I distribute my negative here. Now, one thing that also is different here is that we have a different set of like terms. So I have a c to the third starting off my problem here, but I have a c squared starting off my problem here. So I'm going to need to pay attention to where I set up my like terms. So ultimately, my final answer will be 9c to the third minus 5c squared plus 5c minus 11. Moving into numbers 6 through 13, we are finding the product. So for number 6, I'm going to go ahead and use for starting off with number 5, I'm going to begin by using the foiling method or the box method to solve these. So moving this up, and please excuse me if my writing on the side isn't aligning up with the problems. I will always make sure that I'm writing the actual problem as I go through and solve this. So in this first section, I have 2z plus 9, and I have z minus 7. Using the box method, I have 4 terms here, so I'm going to make sure that I have 4 boxes. I'm going to put 2z on the outside, 9 as well. I'm going to put a z up top and a minus 7. 2z times z is going to give me 2z squared. Z times 9 is going to give me 9z. Negative 7 times 2z is going to give me negative 14z. And then negative 7 times positive 9 is going to give me negative 63. I'm able to combine these terms here because they both have a solo z. So my final answer is going to be 2z squared minus 5z minus 63. So that's my final answer for number 5. Number 6. Number 6 says 5m minus 8 and 5m minus 7. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and do my box method. I've got my 5m, my negative 8, my 5m, the negative 7. Once again, I'm going to combine my like terms diagonally. So ultimately, my final answer will be 25m squared minus 75m plus 56. Number 7. Now number 7's a little different. It says b plus 2, and then I have negative b squared plus 4b minus 3. So I'm going to need to pay careful attention as I'm creating my box. Now for this box, it's going to need at least 2 parts on the side, but 3 parts going horizontally because of that. So I'm going to have the b and the 2 here, but I'm going to have negative b squared, the 4b, and the negative 3 here. I'm going to be left with negative b to the 3rd and negative 2b squared. I'm going to be left with 4b squared and 8b, negative 3b, and negative 6. Now here I'm going to have 2 groups that I can combine together diagonally. My b squareds I can combine, and my b's I can combine. So my final answer is going to be negative b to the 3rd plus 2b squared plus 5b minus 6. That is our final answer on number 7. Number 8. Number 8 says 5 plus 7y and 1 minus 9y. Once again, I'm going to set up the box. 5 and 7y, 1, negative 9y. I'm going to be able to combine my like terms here. So that's going to leave me with 5 minus, that'd be 38, y minus 63y squared. Now, while this is the final answer, typically when we are identifying these, we want to make sure that we have them in power order from greatest to least. So we can rewrite this as negative 63y squared minus 38y plus 5. And that also would be an appropriate final answer. Now for me, I got to switch my page, so I'm going to move on to number 9. Now, for time's sake, because I really don't think you guys want to be watching an hour-long video, I'm going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit. Okay. Now for number 11, 12, for numbers 11 and 12, in our problem, it says 12 minus 3g squared. That means that I have two sets of 12 minus 3g. So, multiplying this, I'd get 144 minus 36g minus 36g plus 9g squared. Can combine these two together, giving me 144 minus 72g plus 9g squared. And I can also rewrite this so that it says 9g squared minus 72g plus 144. Either one of those is an acceptable answer. Okay. Now, taking a look at numbers 14 through 22. For number 14, our problem begins with x squared plus 8x plus 7. In this problem, our task is to factor the polynomial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my factoring method. I'm going to put the 7 up top, and I'm going to put the 8 on the bottom. Now I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together to give me 7, but add or subtract together to give me 8. Because both of these terms are positive, I'm going to have two positive groupings inside. And the numbers that multiply together to give me 7 are 1 and 7, and they can add together to give us 8. So I'm going to have an x in the front of both, and I'm going to have a 1 and a 7. So x plus 1, x plus 7 is our final answer. On number 15, we're going to go ahead and use slide, divide, bottoms up. So this is a technique, so this way we don't have to guess everything. So here, for number 15, we have 2n squared minus 11n plus 15. I'm going to begin by sliding the 2 over to the 15, making this n squared minus 11n plus 30. Now I'm going to look for factors that multiply together to give me 30, but add or subtract together to give me negative 11. In this case, negative 5 and negative 6 multiply together to give me positive 30, but they add together to give me negative 11. Now, because they're both negative, that means that my n's are both going to be negative. Or, sorry, inside each parentheses, there will be a minus sign there to indicate the negative. Now, I'm going to divide each group by that 2. Because I had to move it over, now I have to get rid of it. So I'm going to divide by 2 here, and I'm going to divide by 2 here. What that means here, when I go 6 divided by 2, that gives me 3. So I've got n minus 3. And over here, 5 divided by 2, that doesn't come out cleanly. So I'm going to slide, bottoms up the 2 to the n. So I'm going to get 2n minus 5 and n minus 3 as my final answer. Now I'm going to do the same thing once again on 16. So I'm going to do one more problem in that section to help you guys out. Now for number 16, our problem says negative 12r squared plus 5r plus 3. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to first take out this negative. That's going to make my life a lot easier. So I'm going to take out a negative, and that's going to leave me with 12r squared minus 5r minus 3. Now, I'm going to go ahead and multiply my 12 over to the 3, leaving me with a negative r squared minus 5r, and then that's going to be minus 36. Now my task is to look for numbers that multiply together to give me negative 36, but add together to give me negative 5. In this case, those two values are negative 9 and positive 4. Negative 9 times positive 4 gives me negative 36. Negative 9 plus 4 gives us 5. So I'm going to rewrite this as negative parentheses r minus 9 and r plus 4. Now, because we had the 12, we're going to need to go ahead and divide each one of these terms by 12. Now, because if we were to move the 12 up here, we'd get 12r plus 4, and if we were to move the 12 up here, we'd get 12r minus 9. 12 times 12 gives us 144. That's what we don't want up here. So we are going to need to simplify these first. 9/12 reduces to be 3/4. So I have negative parentheses r minus 3/4, and over here I have r plus 1/3. What we're going to do now is bottoms up the 3 and bottoms up the 4. That's going to leave us with negative parentheses 4r minus 3, 3r plus 1. And if we were to double check this, we'd get exactly negative 12r squared plus 5r plus 3. So this is our final answer. Taking a look at number 18. For number 18, we have negative 3n squared plus 75. When we're multiplying, or in this case factoring, we don't ever really want a negative to be in front. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a greatest common factor. And in this case, 3 can go into both 3 and 75. And if I take the negative away with it, I get negative 3 parentheses and squared, and then 75 divided by negative 3 is negative 25. What I now have is a grouping with a perfect square. So I can square root my 25, and I can square root my n. Now the square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of n is n. So I get n, and 5 and 5. Now in order for there not to be a middle term, one of our groupings has to be positive, the other grouping has to be negative. So putting this together, I'm going to have negative 3, n minus 5, and n plus 5. This is our final answer. Moving forward, number 22, we have y to the third plus 2y squared minus 81y minus 162. This is a factor by grouping problem. What this means is I have 4 terms here. So I'm going to draw a line down my 4 terms. Now each grouping has a greatest common factor. We are now going to look for that. Over here, the greatest thing that can pull out from both y to the third and 2y squared is a y squared. So I'm going to pull out y squared. And when I take 2 y's away from y to the third, I'm left with a y. And when I take the y squared away from 2y squared, I'm just left with 2. So on my left side, I have y squared parentheses y plus 2. On the other side, the greatest thing that both negative 81y and negative 162 have in common is that negative 81. So I'm going to take negative 81 away, and when I take negative 81 away from negative 81y, I'm just left with y. And negative 162 divided by negative 81, that also happens to be positive 2. So, putting this together, I'm going to have my sames, which are the y plus 2 and y plus 2. I'm just going to have one of those. And then I'm going to put my other ones together. Now that leaves me with my y squared minus 81. Now, y squared plus 81 can be broken down even further. Because 81 is a perfect square, we can break 81 down to 9 and 9, and my y squared to y and y. Once again, there's no middle term here, so I can put it as y minus 9, y plus 9, and then I'll add on that y plus 2 at the very end, leaving us with this as our final answer. When we take a look at numbers 23 through 31, they're all going to have some component that's very similar to this, but the big difference is that they all say equals 0. So not only are you going to need to factor, but you're also going to need to solve. So an example of that would be on numbers 23, and I'm also going to go ahead and do number 25 as well. So for number 23, 23 says 25a equals 10a squared. Now first, I need to get them all to be on the same side. So I'm going to minus my 25a from both sides. And that's going to leave me with 0 is equals to 10a squared minus 25a. Now I want to look for something that they both have in common, the 10a squared and the 25a. 5 can be a factor of both, and I can also pull out an a. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to leave it as 0 equals 5a, and then I'm going to be left with 2a minus 5. Now I'm going to have to set the 5a and the 2a minus 5 equals to 0. So I'm going to have 0 equals 5a, and I'm going to have 2a minus 5 equals 0. I'm going to divide by 5 here, and I'm going to add 5 over here, leaving me with 2a equals 5. I'm going to divide by 2, giving me a is equals to 5 over 2. Here, when I go 0 divided by 5, I get a is equals to 0. So my values of a are 0 and 5 over 2. That would be my final answer for number 23. For number 25, it's going to be similar, but I'm potentially going to have 2 or more answers. So here we have x squared minus 22x equals negative 121. Now once again, this is equals to 0. This is equals to negative 121. So we need to make this as a problem equals to 0. So I'm going to add 121 to both sides, giving me x squared minus 22x plus 121 equals 0. Now, here I'm looking for 2 numbers that multiply together to give me 121, but add together to give me negative 22. Those 2 numbers are negative 11 and negative 11. So I get x squared, or in this case, x minus 11 in one parentheses and x minus 11 in another. And those both equal 0. Now because they're the same, I only need to set one of them equals to 0. So I'm going to get x minus 11 equals 0. I'm going to add 11 to both sides, giving me x equals to 11. So for this particular problem, my answer is 11. All right. Now lastly, let's say I've got, let's do number 28. On number 28, I have 4x squared plus 22x, equals 22x plus 42. Once again, in this particular grouping, we need it to say equals 0. So I'm going to begin by minusing the 22x and minusing the 42. So I get 4x squared minus 22x minus 42 equals 0. Now, I want to pull out something to make this a lot easier for myself. I want to pull out a common factor. The number 2 can go into every number there. So I'm going to take 2 parentheses, and then I'd be left with 2x squared minus 11x minus 21 equals 0. Now, I need to go ahead and use slide divide bottoms up here. So I'm going to take my 2 that's inside the parentheses, and I'm going to multiply it by that negative 21, leaving me with 2 parentheses, x squared minus 11x minus 42 equals 0. Now, I want 2 numbers that multiply together to give me negative 42, but add together to give me 11. Here, that add or subtract together to give me 11. The numbers 14 and 3 can multiply together to give us negative 42 and add together to give us 11. So negative 14 and positive 3. So I'm going to get 2 parentheses, x minus 14, x plus 3 inside is equals to 0. Now that 2 that we originally got rid of, we need to put back in here. So I'm going to divide each one of these by 2. Now 14 can easily be divided by 2, so I'm going to have 2 parentheses, x minus 7. And over here, this 2 is going to bottoms up in front, giving me 2x plus 3 equals 0. Now all of this I now need to set individually equals to 0. So here we go. I'm going to have the 2 equals to 0. That's not a true statement, so that one doesn't work out. Next, I'm going to go x minus 7 equals 0. I'm going to add 7 to both sides, giving me x that has a value of 7. So far that works. Now my other one, 2x plus 3 equals 0. I'm going to minus 3 from both sides, giving me 2x equals negative 3. Now I'm going to divide by 2, giving me x is equals to negative 3 over 2. So that tells me that my final 2 answers for number 28, and I know this has been a long one, is x is equals to 7 and negative 3 over 2. All right, now on here, if you have any other questions at all, please send me a message, leave me a comment. I'm here to help any way I can on this assignment. Thank you so very much for watching. This has been Mrs. Ross Does Math.